Welcome, everyone. We are going to begin now by going over the general disclaimer slide. If you could, please read the slide. If we mention or show any pictures or trade names of equipment, companies, or services, they are not endorsements by DEP. Also, the information in this presentation is meant for discussions about various existing and potential regulatory mechanisms. No final decision regarding the information in this meeting is expressed or implied by DEP. Next slide, please. Good afternoon. My name is Janice Hottinger, Supervisor of the E-Waste Unit. Thank you for joining DEP today to discuss the revisions to the electronic waste rule amendments. Next slide, please. Amendments to the rules are necessary to accurately reflect the revisions to the e-waste law, which was enacted in January of 2017, with full implementation beginning in 2018. The rules are being rewritten to clarify and better enforce these revisions. This slide presentation format is similar to the stakeholder meeting held in October of 2019. After that meeting, we took your concerns into account as we amended the rules. Therefore, some of the information on the slides will be different today as we move closer to formally proposing the rules. Definitions will be described and refined within each speaker's presentation. The roles and responsibilities of original equipment manufacturers, group plan administrators, authorized recyclers, and local government units have been clearly defined to ensure compliance. The credit process of accumulation and trading will be clarified. Compliance with and enforcement of the rules has been refined so that everyone is aware of the expectations. Next slide, please. The goal of this meeting is to take what we hear from you, industry experts, environmental organizations, and local and county partners, and improve the existing rules. The final rule will be reflective of the diverse perspectives we receive and how they fit into the framework of the law. Next slide, please. The following are members of the rulemaking team. Assistant Commissioner's Office, Site Remediation and Waste Program, Judith Andraco, Esquire, Regulatory Officer and Facilitator. Bureau of Recycling and Hazardous Waste Management, Daniel Clark, PhD, Environmental Specialist and Rule Manager. Aaron Flew, Bureau Chief. Janice Hottinger, Supervisor. Scott Compton, Environmental Specialist. John Dickinson, Rule Assistant. And the Bureau of Hazardous Waste Compliance and Enforcement, Nick Byer, Environmental Specialist. Judy Andraco will be facilitating the question and answer sessions for this meeting. Next slide, please. DEP wants to ensure that all present have an opportunity to provide input and comments, so I'm going to go over the meeting guidelines. Please enter your first and last name and the organization you represent in the chat box in lieu of a sign-in sheet. Also, please use the chat box to enter questions about technical difficulties during the presentation, such as you cannot hear or see someone. Please ensure that your microphone is muted and that your camera is off when not speaking. When called on to speak, please unmute your microphone and consider turning on your camera. When you have finished speaking, please remute your microphone and turn off your camera. Please speak slowly and clearly and state your name and affiliation. Question and answer sessions will be offered throughout the presentation and at the very end. Please use the hand symbol to ask a question during the question and answer sessions. For those unfamiliar with this feature, hover your cursor over the hand symbol and click it to effectively raise your hand. If you have multiple questions about each topic, please allow others time to speak and direct your remaining questions to the panel at the end of the presentation. You will notice that certain statements are in different colors. We are using orange to denote concepts that have not yet been implemented but are proposed in the rules. yellow to denote concepts that DEP has begun implementing, and green to denote concepts that are in the law and have been in effect since 2018. Next slide, please. The following topics will be discussed by the e-waste unit members: program overview, obligation, collection plans, credit program, performance standards, record keeping, compliance and enforcement, fee schedule, and closing remarks. I'm now going to hand the meeting over to Scott Compton, who will discuss the general overview of the program. Scott?
Yep. Thanks, Janice. I'm just going to give a brief overview of the program. The program year for New Jersey's electronics recycling law starts on January 1st. At this time, all registrations and registration fees are due. In the spring, the DEP calculates market share percentages and market share weight for obligations for the following year. A market share percentage, an estimated market share and weight, is determined and issued to those manufacturers with the market share greater than 0.01%. Once issued, there is a window of 10 days whereby a manufacturer has an opportunity to dispute the market share or estimated market share and weight. 60 days from the estimated market share and weight notification, manufacturer collection plans are due. If a manufacturer chooses to work with a group plan administrator, the group plan administrator must submit a group plan designation form signed by the manufacturer 20 days prior to the collection plan due date. Collection plans are reviewed individually and also as a whole to evaluate the sufficiency of the entire network. The next event in the annual cycle is the submission of semi-annual collection report. The purpose of the semi-annual collection report is to show the progress of the collection plan. There are 2 semi-annual reports required per program year. The first is due on August 1st for the January through June time period, and the second is due February 1st for the July through December time period. A thorough review and analysis of the semi-annual reports is performed comparing total collections versus estimated obligations. The final step in the credit accumulation and trading process, we will review this process a little bit later in the presentation. Next slide, please. Determination of estimated market share and weight. The New Jersey e-waste law contains 3 categories of covered electronic devices, or CEDs: televisions, computers, monitors, and tablets, and desktop printers and desktop faxes. The DEP apportions estimated weight obligations based on the percent of national sales weight for each CED category using national sales data for the most recent 12-month period. Individual market shares by category are added together to determine a manufacturer's overall market share for those manufacturers who sell CEDs in more than one category. Next slide. Determination of estimated market share and weight. The DEP determines the total weight of CEDs collected in the program year and multiplies that by the manufacturer's program year market share to determine the manufacturer's estimated market share in weight for a program year. The DEP then provides the manufacturer with its program year market share and its estimated market share and weight via an estimated market share and weight notice. A manufacturer receiving an estimated market share and weight notice may comment on their program year market share or their estimated market share and weight and propose a different program year market share or estimated market share and weight within 10 business days of receiving the notice. And now I will turn it over to Dan, who will be talking about things that will change or codification of how things have already been done.
Thank you, Scott. Actually, Tyrone, we should be on the previous slide, collection plans. Thank you. So manufacturer must submit a collection plan to the DEP within 60 days of receiving its estimated market share and weight. The plan must include the methods and services that would be used to collect CEDs, including identifying information about the collection sites and events, and a description of the processes and methods that would be used to recycle CEDs, including identifying information about authorized recyclers that be used, a description of the means that would be used to publicize collection services, and a description of how the manufacturer intends to meet its collection obligation through its own operations. Additionally, the certification template must be included, and many manufacturers and group plan administrators are already familiar. This really hasn't changed substantively in the new rules. Next slide, please. And, Scott touched on this briefly. There's not a whole lot that changed in terms of the semi-annual reports. They are due by February 1st and August 1st of each year for every manufacturer or group plan administrator, operator of a collection site, or authorized recycler. And they have to submit, each of those entities must submit a semi-annual report to DEP. And to be clear, the February 1st report covers the July to December reporting period of the previous year, whereas the August 1st report covers the January to June period. Every manufacturer must report on its progress in collecting its estimated market share and weight. Every group plan administrator must report for each of its manufacturers the total weight of CDs collected for each manufacturer and certain information for each authorized recycler for whom the GPA purchased weight. Every GPA must also submit a report summarizing the information reported for its manufacturers. Every operator of a collection site must report the weight of CEDs collected at the site and certain information on CEDs transported from the site. And every authorized recycler must report on the collection, transportation, and sale of weight recycled at the facility and the disposition of any recycled CED or residue from the recycling process. Next slide, please. And this is just a heads up that, we are planning on making a small change to the authorized recycler semi-annual report starting for the 2022 program here. So this will be the semi-annual reports due on August 1st of 2022 that we're just going to add a, tab for consolidated, line by line total amounts of weight sold to each manufacturer GPA. And this is information already provided to DEP in aggregate, but just this way, it'll allow us to process the reports faster, which, means getting back to everybody faster in terms of making sure, we clear up any issues with their reports. Next slide, please. And so, this is some record keeping requirements for authorized recyclers and operators of collection sites. And this lines up with what is already being done for, R2 or E stewards that, our authorized recyclers are already subject to. Authorized recyclers would be required to maintain a covered electronic device receipt to be developed by DEP, which would contain information about the weight, type, place of origin, and transport of CEDs recycled at the facility, and a record of each end user or the recipient of recycled CEDs, and a record of each load of residue transported for disposal. An operator of a collection site would be required to maintain a record of CEDs transported to and from the site, and an authorized recycler and an operator of a collection site would be required to retain the records for a period of 3 years. Next slide, please. And these are, some performance requirements that, we're considering or have already been in place, that the operator of a collection site, transporter, or authorized recycler of CEDs must be certified by the Sustainable Electronics Recycling International's Responsible Recycling Standard for electronics recyclers, which SERI's R2 certification, or the eSteward standard for responsible recycling and reuse of electronic equipment, or another DEP-approved accredited standard. We're not currently aware of any others that are, active in North America, but if such a standard were to arise or be brought to our attention, we would certainly consider it. Additional performance requirements for operators of collection sites would include adequately staffing and securing the site and training staff to properly handle electronically stored personal information, and additional performance standards for ARs would include compliance with any state requirements for permits or approvals. And that's, not just New Jersey state requirements, but also that, for those out-of-state recyclers, that they need to be operating within the law in whatever state they're operating in. Next slide, please. So group plan administrators would be required to comply with the requirements of the rules for each of its participating manufacturer in the same manner as a solo manufacturer. During the program year, group plan administrator may not sell any weight to manufacturers outside of its group or to another group plan administrator until it had collected each of its participating manufacturers' estimated market share and weight for that year, and group plan administrators would be required to collect the actual market share and weight of each of its participating manufacturers in each program year. Next slide, please. And this slide specifically deals with authorized recyclers that also act as group plan administrators. And, we're proposing that weight purchased from another authorized recycler would only be able to be sold to manufacturers within that group and not resold, but weight collected, transported, and recycled from other sources, that is, weight collected, transported, and recycled by the authorized recycler acting as a GPA, would be able to be sold to manufacturers outside the group or other manufacturers as well as manufacturers within the group. So that concludes my portion, and I'm going to turn it over to Judy for our first Q&A.
All right, for any of you who may have questions about our prior presentations this afternoon, please raise your hand so that we can call on you and we can have direct communications with our speakers. Okay, first person that we've heard from is Andriana Kontovrakis. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but could you please turn on your audio and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Dan, could you walk through the last slide again? Hello, I'm sorry.
Okay. The last slide, what we are considering is that for those authorized recyclers that also act as a group plan administrator, so that are, performing a dual role in New Jersey, that if those entities are purchasing weight, that is weight that they are not processing as an AR, that is weight that they are buying from another authorized recycler, that it would not be able to be resold outside of the group. Whereas weight, processed by that authorized recycler that is also a group plan administrator, could be sold, outside the group. That is to say that, if you have this AR that is also a group plan administrator and they are buying weight from another AR, that they then should not be turning around and selling it to manufacturers outside of their group. Does that answer your question, Andriana?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next up is Jay Sims from Monmouth County.
Thank you. How you doing? Just a quick question. Dan, we finally get to see each other face to face. I talked to you a lot over emails. We just renewed our contract for our electronics drop-off, and we're about to do the submission for the award letter. I held off because of this stakeholders meeting. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Are there anything directly particular that you're looking for the drop-off sites other than what you just covered in this past session?
No, and I mean, I would say in terms of, and I see, Dawn also asked in the chat about expectations for training of staff. I mean, this is, what we've been doing, pretty much for the entirety of the program, that, it's expected that, sites are staffed and secured is really the big thing, that it can't be, I guess the biggest thing, in terms of best practices and in terms of the, certification schemes is that the collection sites should not be open in such a way that, somebody could come in and, be picking dropped off items out of there. Some outside person could be doing that, that it needs to be in some way staffed and secured, so that way you're not having just random members of the public coming in and, pulling items out of those drop-off sites, is, which is a standard that we've had in place, I think, for the entirety of the program. And, if that's not the case, I apologize. I've been with the department a little over 2.5 years, so I can't speak for the first couple years of the program, but I think, at least since I've been here, that this is, a standard we've had. So, we're not really expecting any change in that way, no. Does that answer your question, Jay?
It does. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything else before I give our purchasing the thumbs up with everything else. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Dawn, does that, if that doesn't answer your question, please let me know too. I think that was also a question you'd put in the chat.
Yes, good afternoon. Just wanted to make sure about the training though. Staffing and securing is one thing, but do you expect the staff to have certain training other than covered versus non-covered? Is there anything else that you were hoping for?
No. I mean, really, essentially what we've been doing, no substantive changes in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question is from David Hirschler.
Hi, thanks. So yeah, I'm curious about a couple of things. So first of all, the forms that you'd like the ARs and collectors to use, you said that that's going to be something that DEP develops, or will it be something that we can use an equivalent, or is it a requirement to use the DEP form that you'll develop? And if so, can you walk through what's going to be on that form? I think 3 slides earlier, you have a requirement that CEDs be, you can go one more, yeah. Oh, that was next one. So a covered electronic device receipt. So you said that was going to be developed by DEP. Can you walk through what's on that form?
No, we haven't developed it yet, Dave. And I mean, I think that is something as we would approach that, we would certainly be soliciting input and feedback from, recyclers and collection sites to make that something, that would probably, and, like I said, we haven't really, this is not something that's been developed at all, so I don't know, but it would be certainly something that we would be soliciting feedback from collection sites and recyclers for, so it would be something that would be not adding documentation. It is not, our goal to be adding a documentation burden on anybody, and I could certainly see this being something that would, interact with whatever type of system people are working off of to make it easy. That is something we appreciate that, everybody does, keep records, and that this is something that takes time and effort to do. So it's certainly something that if we were going to develop something new for record keeping, it'd be in everybody's interest to do it in a way that made sense and was easy.
Okay. Then my next question was, you have a requirement that group administrators cannot sell weight outside of their group until they've met the obligation within their group. I guess in the event that that's previously agreed upon and included in a plan, is that something that, is there an exception to that if it's been previously discussed as part of our group submission, that in addition to what we're collecting within the group, there will be weight that's sold outside of the group?
Sorry, I'm writing this down because this, we're trying to keep track of your comments, so that way, as we move forward. And, so this is under consideration. I think in particular, ERI is in an interesting position in terms of, you are one of our actors that is a group plan administrator that is also an AR. So, along with the 18th slide, so Tyrone 2 forward, please. The 17th, sorry, this one, yeah. So weight processed by ERI could be sold outside of ERI's group prior to hitting their obligation, but not weight bought from other recyclers could then not retravel outside of the group. does that sound right to everybody who's worked on this with me? Judy, Scott, looks like you're nodding your head.
Yes, I was, but I was on mute.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that makes more sense. Understood.
That answers your question, Dave?
I think so. Thank you.
Andriana, do you have an additional question? Your hand was still up.
I typed it in. I just said, what is the rule implementation timeline?
Schedule-wise, we're hoping to propose in the New Jersey Register early next year, which then we would have a 60-day comment period and public hearing to receive additional feedback and comments from the regulated community. And we would intend to adopt within 1 year of the publication of the proposal. So the actual adoption date and effective date of the rules would ideally be early 2023.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sure. David Hertzler, you have a question? Your hand is up.
No, I just went. I think I lowered my hand.
Okay. Maybe my system's a little bit slow. Patrick Santelli, your question, please.
Hi, thanks. This is Patrick Santelli with MRM. Dan, and this is in regards to slide 16, and I think Dave was asking the same question. You know, MRM is a group plan administrator, and do I read this correctly that the proposal is group plans cannot sell to manufacturers outside of their plan, and that's correct? During the program year.
Yes, I think if I'm understanding your question, yes, that is the proposal.
And then would that apply to authorized recyclers as well? Would MRM be able to sell to authorized recyclers during the program year?
You know, I think in that case, I mean, that should be, and you know, this is some of this comes down to record keeping. And I mean, I think that weight then should appear as a recycler to recycler transaction if it's being sold. You know, presumably MRM would be getting that weight from a recycler, and it would then be being sold to another recycler. So recycler to recycler transactions during the program here are allowable.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone have any other oral questions? Tricia Conroy. Tricia? You probably have
Thank you. I'm just going to follow up on Patrick's question for MRM because we are in 2 different locations. So I just want to follow up with one question. On Dave's and Patrick's questions, if in a plan, the sale to another manufacturer is already denoted in the plan that's submitted, and the collection network that's proposed collects the volume that is adequate to cover both the plan and the additional individual manufacturer to which the plan is selling, is that prohibited? So you would get a plan with the proposed network that had enough pounds to sell to someone else and to supply the group plan. It's prohibited from selling to that manufacturer? Or would that plan not be approved?
I'm not entirely sure I'm catching the drift of what you're saying, Tricia. And I think, you know, if this is something, you know, maybe you and I could talk, or, you know, we could set up a meeting with the team to talk through this. But just in terms of, you know, a hypothetical like that, I think I'm not.
Oh, I'd argue that it's broader, Daniel. I think can a group plan support a manufacturer outside of its plan? And if the plan presents that to you up front, then is it prohibited? And I think that's broader than just MRM. I think that's any group plan may also support individual manufacturers that want to do their own plan, but work with the same entity that has a group plan, but don't want to be under it. I think that's broader.
I mean,
And we
I
can
think,
follow up. That's kind of detailed. We can follow up later, but I think it's a broader question than just MRM.
yeah, and we certainly could, follow up on that. I think I'm not, at this moment, I think that is something we would really need to get into the specifics a bit of to make sure that we were on the same page in terms of answering that.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for considering the question.
Next hand raised is Patrick Santelli.
Sorry, I thought my hand was lowered. I already asked my question.
Okay. Next, Amanda Tisker or Tisher Burrows.
Thank you. Yeah, it's Amanda Tisher-Burris with Dynamic. I just wanted to echo off of Trisha's comment. I think that I think there's a lot of implications with this proposal when it comes to how this is going to affect the kind of the support of the different group plans and the authorized recyclers within the state. So if there is going to be conversation taken offline to dive into this item a little bit further, I would maybe like to propose that maybe the group plans could connect with the state collectively so that we could discuss the issues and kind of how it all applies to the different areas and how we work together and work separately to support manufacturers within the program.
Okay. I think that's completely feasible. And I presume that Dan and a member of the team would be following up with you guys. Okay. Any other hands raised? Trisha Conroy? You're muted.
Nope, I had lowered my hand. Sorry, I think you're the delay.
Okay.
In there. Thanks.
No worries. I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Any more hand raises? Going once? Going twice? Okay, no more hand raises. Now I'm going to check the chat and see if there are any questions that are outstanding there. There's a question from Don Latinsix. Please forgive me if I'm not pronouncing last names correctly. What are the expectations for training of staff at collection sites?
We got to that, Judy.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
Okay. And okay, we did the color coding and we discussed the implementation timeline. Okay, I think everything is covered. This Q&A will be closed for now. We'll move on to the next topic, which will be brought to you by Scott Compton. Take it away, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. I'm going to do a program year analysis, explain that a little bit. The program year analysis, formerly known as the true-up process, is the process by which the department verifies and calculates the total weight collected in a program year and then compares that total with previous estimates. There are 4 steps to the program year analysis. Step 1 is to calculate the total amount of CEDs collected in the program year based on the semi-annual reporting data from manufacturers, collection site locations, and authorized recyclers. This also includes determining in-system and out-of-system weight for the program year. Step 2 is to compare the total actual weight collected to the estimated obligation. Step 3 is to adjust the overall obligation based on collections by all manufacturers if necessary and is done at DEP discretion. DEP's mission is to guarantee that sufficient collection and recycling of e-waste takes place first and foremost about how much overall is collected, and then that each manufacturer collected its assigned share. Please note that the DEP has and does adjust down. This has been for the benefit of the regulated community to adjust actual obligation down. The statute has given us a safety valve. DEP is not expecting to revise estimated obligations every year. It is done based on unusual or extenuating circumstances. Step 4 is to calculate the manufacturer's actual obligation using the total weight collected during the program year, then determine whether manufacturers undercollected, exceeded, or met their obligation. Next slide. Credit accumulation and trading, the process. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm one ahead. Back one. Credit accumulation and trading. DEP did this for the 2020 program year in the spring of 2021. DEP largely views this as a success for the first time the credit trading period was run, in that the DEP was able to track the movement of credits and that at least some credits transferred among manufacturers and allowed them to cure a shortfall, which is the ultimate goal. That said, DEP would welcome feedback on how to make this easier. Next slide, Tyrone. How credits are determined, the process. DEP calculates a manufacturer's actual market share and weight for a completed program year after receipt of the semi-annual reports due February 1st of the following year by determining the total weight of CEDs collected from consumers during the completed program year, including weight that was not program eligible, and multiplying that weight by the manufacturer's market share for the completed year. A manufacturer whose actual market share and weight for the completed program year was greater than its estimated market share and weight for that year will receive a single credit for each pound of excess weight collected. A manufacturer whose actual market share in weight was less than its estimated market share weight will have a shortfall. A credit equals 1 pound of program eligible weight collected by a manufacturer in excess of its actual market share and weight. Program eligible weight is weight recycled in compliance with the Act by an authorized recycler who is certified under the R2 or e-Steward standards and compliant with the e-waste rules performance standards. Next slide. Step 2, DEP notifies a manufacturer of its actual market share and weight for a completed program year and any increase or decrease in its collection obligation for that year. This notification will include the number of any credits earned or the amount of the shortfall weight. Step 3, credit trading. A manufacturer awarded credits for a completed program year may apply up to 25% of the credits to its collection obligation for the following year or sell the credits to other manufacturers with a shortfall during a 45-day credit trading period to be established by DEP. A manufacturer with a shortfall will be required to cure the shortfall during the credit traded period through the purchase of credits from other manufacturers. Next slide. Credit trading and group plan administrators. A group plan administrator may transfer or apply credits earned by one or more of its members to other members if the GPA's contract with its members authorizes it to do so and the group plan administrator collects, transports, and recycles CEDs in excess of the combined actual market share and weight of its members. If a group plan administrator meets the above criteria, the group plan administrator may transfer credits to one or more of its members with a shortfall in an amount not to exceed the actual member shortfall, apply credits to one or more of its members with an actual market share and weight surplus to satisfy up to 25% of that member's estimated market share and weight for the following program year, provided the member collected its entire estimated market share and weight for the preceding program year, and the weight collected was equal to or exceeded the member's actual market share and weight for that year, or both, if sufficient credits are available. Next slide. Credit trading reporting and record keeping. Within 5 business days of the close of the credit trading period, a manufacturer awarded credits, including a manufacturer whose credits were transferred or applied by a group plan administrator, will be required to submit a report to the department detailing the disposition of the credits. A group plan administrator would be required to maintain records on the transfer or application of credits between and among its members for a period of 3 years following the conclusion of the credit trading report, which records records shall be made available to the department upon request. And now I will turn it over to John Dickinson to review failure to cure a shortfall.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon. My name is John Dickinson, and I am assisting in the development of the e-waste rule amendments. As you can see, this slide addresses a manufacturer's failure to cure a shortfall. As indicated earlier, a manufacturer notified of a shortfall for a program year must cure that shortfall within the credit trading period. In instances where a manufacturer fails to cure a shortfall, The department may assess a civil administrative penalty, a non-compliance fee, or both, subject to the department's enforcement discretion. In determining whether and how to exercise its enforcement discretion, the department reviews all relevant information in its possession. To that end, in shortfall situations, a manufacturer would be provided an opportunity to explain the circumstances surrounding the shortfall through a written submission. In that submission, a manufacturer would address the following. 1, the amount of the shortfall. 2, whether the manufacturer met its estimated market share and weight for the year of the shortfall, or if not, the reasons therefor. 3, the steps taken to cure the shortfall. And 4, the steps taken to prevent a recurrence. The department will consider the collective weight of all of those factors in considering its enforcement options, and the factors will be set forth in more detail in the proposed rule. I should note there is no guarantee of a particular result, only that the department will consider all information submitted by the manufacturer in exercising its enforcement discretion. I'll now pass this back to Judy for questions.
Thanks, John. Are there any of you have questions regarding the presentation from both Scott and John? Please raise your hand and we'll call upon you in the order that you raised your hand. First up is David Hirschler.
Thanks, Judy. So 2 questions. First of all, just to understand, the group administrators can transfer credits if they meet their criteria only to their members and not outside of their group. Is that correct?
John and Scott, you're muted.
Scott's muted.
And I answered it, so sorry. Yeah, that Dan, yes, that's what we're proposing. Right now, yes. And I think it sounds like this is going to roll into that other conversation we just had and might have to set up, a separate little meeting.
Yeah, agreed. And then the second question is, so in terms of the credit process, first of all, I would say I agree that you guys did a great job of managing that. The one challenge that it doesn't look like this rule addresses is the credit process with the ability to retain overages in only one direction kind of gives an incentive to not sell additional credits. And so I was curious if there's any thoughts in the rules to addressing that kind of discrepancy where there's an incentive for a manufacturer to choose not to sell their overage because of the way the system is only one-sided. There's a shortfall, but no challenges with overages.
I'm not sure we have talked about that, but I mean, we'll note it down and then come back and discuss that. Anything that we do decide, you would see in the proposal.
If I might, a second to Scott,
Sure,
Dave, just to address your comment, and to add on to what Scott said, that's not something we've addressed, but it is in the statute in terms of the 25% overage. That is something that's statutory, so that's not something that we would have the power to. Not that we wouldn't have any power, but in terms of in rule writing, we'd be pretty limited in terms of what we could do to try to address that from that angle, I guess, in terms of providing disincentives for that.
Understood. Thanks.
Do we have any other questions? Any hand raisings? Going once? Going twice? Okay, we don't have any more hands. Let me double check the chat. We don't have additional questions in the chat. So at this point, I'm going to toss the presentation over to Nick Beyer for compliance and enforcement.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Nick. I'm with an inspector with the Bureau of Hazardous Waste Compliance and Enforcement. I figured we'd discuss some of the department's compliance tools. So we'll start with the compliance list. DEP is going to maintain on this website a list of all the manufacturers that are currently in compliance with all the rules and regulations. And this is going to bleed into the next point, which is the sale ban. And retailers are expected to consult with this list and restrict the sale of products from manufacturers that are not on the list because presumably they're non-compliant. And then finally, of course, the dreaded non-compliance fee for not collecting the entire obligation. I'll stress that the non-compliance fee is not a shortfall fee, it's a fee on the entire obligation. Unfortunately, this is outlined in the statute, so there would need to be a legislative change for this to be modified. We have some discretion as to whether or not to assess it, but once it's assessed, how we calculate it, really there's not much flexibility. It's going to have to be a fee on the entire obligation instead of a shortfall fee. Next slide, please. Next up, we have penalties. A little background, the past couple years, DEP has provided an extensive compliance assistance service as we started to roll out some of these newer rules. We're still planning on moving more into an enforcement-oriented approach. At this point, we're expecting that everybody is more or less familiar with the new law and how we're going about this, and we'll continue to use compliance history to determine how we will assess penalties and negotiate them. DEP does have a statutory framework for enforcing violations of the Electronic Waste Management Act that's going to be codified in the new rules. This slide's kind of a brief summary of those changes. First is the law kind of bisects the violations into two lanes. One is violations with a penalty from $500 to $1,000, and the second is penalties with a maximum dollar amount of $25,000. We're planning on implementing a set of base penalties in the rules, so penalties with a explicit dollar amount lined out for them, or violations, I should say, with a dollar amount lined out for them, that DEP can then adjust based on past compliance history, repeat violations, etc. Some more complicated violations that maybe will arise due to various different circumstances wouldn't have a base penalty. For those, the DEP will default to a matrix penalty assessment like we do for some of our other rules. And the matrix is a method we use that factors the conduct of the violator and the seriousness of the violation to scale a penalty to the scenario that is involved with the violation. DEP can also choose to forego a base penalty in the event that the conduct or seriousness of the violation is so extreme that the base penalty is not deemed a large enough deterrent. And then, of course, violations and penalties typically come with a notice of penalty, and along with that, an opportunity to contest it. I'm just going to note, of course, that the law outlines a 35-day time frame for getting a hearing request in on the 36th day. If it's not in its final order, and DEP doesn't have an obligation to conduct a settlement or lower the penalty. So make sure that if you, hopefully, we'll have no violations, but hopefully if you have one, we will make sure you get the hearing request in if that is your desire. Next page, please. Okay, so we're going to discuss the grace period really quickly. For many of its programs, DEP offers this grace period rule. Violations are split into two categories, non-minors or minors. All violations have, regardless of whether they're minor or non-minor, are going to be given a time frame for which the violator is expected to come back into compliance. The grace period allows for minor violations in which the manufacturer comes back into compliance within the time frame. The penalty is waived, whereas non-minor violations, the penalty is mandatory. Compliance history can preclude the grace period rule from applying, so a repeat violator may not be given the opportunity of a grace period if this is something that's been problematic in the past. And then, of course, if anybody is unable or unwilling to regain compliance, DEP typically administers an administrative order to order the return to compliance. And that's what I have here. I'm going to pass it back to John for his section.
Thanks, Nick. As you can see from this slide, the department's working on a fee schedule for inclusion into the proposed rules. The Electronic Waste Management Act authorizes the department to charge reasonable fees for any of the services to be performed in connection with the act. And consistent with that authority, the fee schedule would establish fees to cover the cost of reviewing collection plans and semi-annual reports, as well as other program activities. The fees would supplement other funding sources available to the department as necessary and ensure the continued and efficient operation of the waste program for the years to come. While the exact structure of the fee schedule remains to be determined, the fee schedule will be available for public review and comment during the proposed rules 60-day comment period. I'll now turn this back to Judy for questions.
Thanks, John. Do we have any questions from the attendees? First, if you have any questions about the compliance and enforcement grace period and fee schedule issues, please raise your hand and we'll call upon you in the order in which you raised. Going once, going twice. Oop, we have one. David Hirschler.
I feel like I'm the only one who speaks up. Just, I guess, the fee schedule to understand. So in addition to the registration fees for manufacturers and the registration fees for authorized recyclers, there would be additional fees on added to allow the department to review the various reports. And do you know which entities that fee would be based on? Or who would he apply to?
I think the fees would relate to the entity generating, in the case of the reports and the collection plans, the entity generating the document. We don't have yet a fee structure in place, and it's still working in progress. So we're trying to develop something that would be fair and equitably applied across the board. But I would think in terms of who has to pay the fee, it's going to be the entity generating the work that's necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions on the compliance and enforcement grace period and fee schedule issues? Okay, I don't see any hands. I double checked the chat, and I would just like to give all of you another opportunity. Do you have any other questions that you'd like to ask the panelists today regarding any of the information topics that we have discussed since the beginning of this meeting? Okay, we haven't received any additional questions or comments. So I'm going to toss the action over to Janice.
All right, thank you. Thank you all for participating in our stakeholder meeting and providing your comments. Summaries of the topic and the relevant information covered in this meeting will be made available following the meeting in the link you see at A on the screen. Following publication of the rule in the New Jersey Register, written comments on the rule will be made by anyone during the 60-day comment period. Comments on the rule proposal shall be submitted as stated in C on the slide. And if you have any additional comments related to this meeting, you may send them to the email address you see at D on the slide. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate your input. Thank you.